Welcome to Dear Marketers, produced by MKT1 and Caspian Studios in partnership with Typeform. This is a show where me and some of my closest marketing friends answer questions from you, B2B startup marketers. We have Jenny Tai, who is a self-described content doula and the current head of content at Vanta. And we have Grace Erickson, who is the VP of Marketing and Partnerships at Cocoon. Grace was also the former agency partner to Taco Bell, which is going to be extremely relevant to everything we talk about when we talk about B2B startup marketing. Quite a claim to fame, Grace.
Hugely important stuff.
Hugely important. Grace and Jenny are actual marketers in seat right now, so they'll have a lot of great perspective. They're also good friends of mine, so we'll have the best banter you've ever heard in your life. And we're going to kick it off.
Dear marketers, I'm Sandy, head of marketing at Pocus. We're an AI sales platform that turns every B2B sales rep into a top performer. And I would say our team is pretty good about not throwing a ton of requests at us, but we do get a lot of requests and we can't do them all. So my question is, what's the best way to prioritize requests from other teams? How do I make sure that I'm taking all of their advice and their suggestions into my plans without derailing them?
Thanks, Sandy, for hitting us with this question that I know so many marketers struggle with. Just how do you handle all of the things coming at you all the time with a limited team, a limited budget, limited time, really crazy goals? How do you handle all the things coming at you? So I know this is going to be one that everyone who has been a marketer ever can relate to, and potentially people in other roles too. So I would love to hear, Grace and Jenny, just like, what are your initial thoughts for Sandy's question? What are you thinking about?
My short answer for, when you are getting lots of random requests is to ask why. Really try to get to the request behind the request to figure out what exactly people are trying to solve. And then that usually leads you down, a line of questioning that gets you to the actual problem that needs to be solved. And then maybe you actually already have a solution. You don't actually have to do the request.
Grace, what's your quick hot take?
Yeah, I think the thing that we all inherently know, but people are hesitant to say, is that there's different rules for different people when it comes to requests. And the sooner you can sort out what those are for yourself and your team and understand those things, the sooner you can actually sort through the request and learn how to prioritize.
Different rules or different roles or both?
Different rules.
Okay.
So a request coming from your CEO is always going to be treated differently than a request coming from an SDR. And that's just how the world works. And to pretend it doesn't work that way is setting everyone up for failure. And so the sooner you can figure out what the rules are for different people, the sooner you can actually move forward.
Yes. So different rules based on their different roles, actually. So
yes. Rules and roles.
Rules and roles. All right. Love semantics. Let's talk all about them. Let's talk about pronunciation the whole time. Everybody will love it. Oh, I've never actually really thought of it said that way, but I think way to call a spade, because I think sometimes we try to treat every request as if it's from the same person or if from a person who has different rules. And so that's a great point and great call out.
Yeah. My CEO is not going to use my form. As much as I would love it so much, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, that's fair. Thanks to our presenting sponsor, Typeform. Typeform has been my default form builder for years, and it's essential in any marketer's stack. We even use a Dear Marketers branded Typeform to gather questions from you, our listeners, for each episode of this podcast. And you can also use Typeform to build forms that capture leads, gather feedback, do customer research, collect testimonials, or even field requests from other teams. And you can sync and connect your results to other tools with their 120 plus integrations. Use code MKT1 to get 20% off their annual growth plan. So I think I see 3 topics that we should dive into here. Tell me if you all agree or if you can think of anything else to add. I think the first thing, I think it was Jenny that said the request behind the request. This is the problem with having multiple co-hosts, is it's going to show up all the time, that I don't remember who said what. So that's going to be fun. But anyway, so Jenny said, what's the request behind the request? And I think that's an important topic, but I think the things behind that are really, how do you handle just like building alignment with other teams? I think also, I don't think either one of you mentioned this at the top, but I think the best defense against requests is your goals, or setting goals. And I don't know that maybe it's a little combative to say that you need a defense against requests, but you definitely need shared goals, and it's the only way you can actually make the right decisions and actually have the why that Jenny was mentioning that's so important to give to people. And then I think we also should just talk about how you manage the request process itself. So yeah, I think that's what I'd love to talk about today. I'd love to talk about how you build alignment, how you share goals. Setting goals is like a whole other can of worms, and maybe someone else will ask that question later in the season and we can talk about how to set them. But I think the sharing of the goals is what's really important here, so people actually know what they are, and then how to manage the request process itself. Sound good? Anything to add, Jenny or Grace, before we try to dissect Sandy's question and dive in deep?
I want someone to keep a tracker of how many times we say goals for this entire time, because I do think it's already over 30.
Probably.
I think we're all also over 30, so there's that.
Perfect. I was young once.
We all were young. We all met when we were in our 20s, except for Jenny. No, I'm just kidding. Jenny was
sad.
I don't remember.
We're
Jenny.
the same age.
I know, but you came in 2 years later, Jenny.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, Jenny. Okay, so we all met at Asana about 10 years ago, but Jenny claims it was 8 years ago for her because she joined the team a little bit later. So
yeah, it's 2016. But it's
in 2016, yeah.
Yes.
But Grace and I started working together probably in 2014 or 2015. I don't remember.
Maybe 2015.
And then we all went to the Taco Bell cantina and we said,
wait, no, if I'm not mistaken, Grace joined 2 months before me, so it would have been end of 2015, and then I joined.
So I've also been downgraded to 8 years.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Well, then we went to the Taco Bell cantina and we said, someday in a decade, we're going to start a podcast and maybe a couple people will listen, but
dreams do come true.
We're living moss with our podcast.
Yes, we are living moss with our podcast.
After a decade of living Manos.
Yes, we are now living moss. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about internal marketing now. So internal marketing, it's interesting. I've written a lot of newsletters and a lot that I thought were better than my internal marketing post. But people, it has a lot of views. And I think part of that is just that this is the universal thing that every marketer has to deal with is marketing, building relationships with other teams. And so when you do get those requests, you have the relationships and they understand why you're saying yes, no, maybe later, whatever it is. So I'd love to get like a sense from both of you, and I'll share as well, just like how you build the rapport with other teams and kick things off on the right foot, or build that alignment that's needed to later on handle all of the random requests that come your way.
This is something that I've been historically like very, very sensitive to. Anytime the way I describe it to people is that everyone thinks that they can do marketing because everybody experiences marketing as a consumer, or in a lot of contexts as a B2B buyer, right? Every day we have people in our inboxes, we drive past billboards, whatever, and people think because they've experienced marketing that they know what it takes to do marketing or knows what marketing should be doing. And I think for a really, really long time, I was super sensitive to that, and any hint of somebody basically doing what I perceived as them telling me what to do, that they knew better than me, I had like an immediate gut reaction that was like, no, do not talk to me. You don't know what you're talking about. And it ended up, what happens is then you invite no ideas whatsoever, right? The like attitude of not wanting to be told what to do about people you perceive as not knowing what you're doing puts you on an island in your organization. And even though maybe you are the best marketer at the company and you know the most about marketing, hopefully, fingers crossed. It doesn't mean you're the only one with good ideas about marketing. And I think what it comes down to is knowing the right ways to invite productive idea sharing and having those relationships so that you can say no and take the best parts and use that as inputs for your plans. I think Cocoon is in a really specific industry that I am not an expert in our industry, and it's been a real learning experience to take the people who are experts in our industry and have worked in it for decades to learn from them. What are the things I'm not seeing? What are the things I don't know that really should be brought into our marketing?
Great points, Grace, on just recognizing that everyone can contribute and hold back but you're not a marketer, you wouldn't understand. If you do feel that way about someone's request, like go talk to your marketing friends about it, or go yell alone about it, but definitely don't let that show, because as soon as you let that show, you do kind of become that island. And something I like to think about though too is like, as someone who gets a lot of requests in marketing, you really feel that pain. And so I think it's also helpful when you request things from other people to like practice or to be the change you wish to see in the world, which is that like when you're requesting things, I think it's really valuable to go to people with problems, not solutions. And so I think the best way to request something is to say, I'll give an example for design. This page isn't really converting. I think it's not obvious how we're different, or this image isn't really doing us any favors and looks like every other image on every website, whatever it may be. Like that's a problem. And like the solution might be kind of obvious, like we need to change the image, but rather than just say change the image, it's really like, here's the challenge that we're facing. Let's come up with solutions together. And like if you start doing that with other teams, maybe they'll start doing it with you. Where they'll come to you with problems. Hey, like I don't think we have enough awareness with this audience, rather than I think we should put a billboard on the freeway. Jenny, what are your internal marketing best practices?
Yeah, I mean, content, the way I've built up that function at, several companies now, it's very much horizontal. We work across the marketing team, across other go-to-market orgs, and so we get a lot of requests. And so a lot of the work that I try to do to get that early alignment pretty much starts as soon as I am in seat in a new role. I spend the first at least 2 weeks meeting with all my key stakeholders across the department, getting a sense for kind of, what their broader goals are, what are the typical ways that they, work with a content team, getting a sense for like what problems they're trying to solve early on so that I can kind of almost anticipate the requests. Kind of to your point about like building defense for requests is just kind of like proactive planning, getting those inputs on where the key priorities are. It's also doing that exercise. It creates the inputs for your plan later on when you put together your overall strategy. But then you can also start seeing kind of like patterns across the different sub teams or orgs where you're like, okay, actually everyone's kind of moving in the same direction around this large objective for the company. So then you can get a sense of where the kind of cross-functional priorities are, and then you can manage those requests against those priorities versus just waiting for all the tickets to come in and figuring out how to triage everything.
Yeah, there's a real value in kind of like pattern matching across the request too, which is like a whole other reason to actually listen to people's requests and what they're asking, because it's usually, if you see this across a lot of places, maybe it's a problem or something that you should actually fix. So it can help the right ideas actually bubble up as well if you're actually listening to all the requests. I think the framework here, or the Kramer, as I often say, is that you've got to think about your shared goals with these other teams. So if you think about each team that you're working with, there's a different goal that they have and a different cause of tension most often. So there's some common things, like sales is going to care about quarterly revenue targets. And so when they're asking things, remember that's probably what they're thinking about. And so there's going to want more pipeline. There's going to see marketing as a service organization to help them hit that pipeline goal. And so just remember that when they're asking things, like remember that that's their stressor, and their compensation like literally depends on hitting that target. So remember that that's their stressor. And maybe if you can't handle a request, you can say, okay, I know we can't handle this, but here's what we are doing to drive pipeline right now. I think it's helpful to understand those motivations. Like the product team, a product manager probably cares that their feature that was their baby that they've worked on for so long actually gets used. And so similar thing. If they're asking for a request, that's probably why. And so knowing how to say, oh, like here's what we are doing to promote that feature. Like if you think about finance, like what do they care about? Well, they care about the budget and hitting the plan. And so again, like you're going to respond differently based on the team that's asking because of what they care about. And I think it's just important to remember what all those things are. And again, remember the role of the asker and therefore the rules that apply, roles and the rules. There's some messy framework here about this. But and I think the founders, something I've learned about working with founders when I was in companies, but especially now that I've worked with hundreds of founders since working in-house, is that every founder has a different idea of what marketing is. And I say this all the time. Some founders think marketing is billboards on the freeway, which is my favorite thing to pick on. Well, I have other favorite things to pick on, but maybe this episode, that's my favorite thing to pick on. You haven't worked at a B2B startup until you've been asked to get a billboard on the freeway in San Francisco, even if you don't live in the Bay Area. Like, it's a rite of passage for sure. Some founders think that marketing is billboards on the freeway. Some founders think that marketing is all paid search. Some think that it's all about getting AI to do your outbound for you, or they think it's all service work to sales. And so it's really important to know what that is because it's going to help give you a lot of context on their requests if you understand what they think marketing is. I think there's also a whole set of founders who think that marketing is mainly to go to trade shows and sponsor them. And so not only is it important to understand this when you start working there, it's also important to understand this before you start working there. To know if, you're going to vibe with the requests that you're going to get from the founder. Like you can tell during an interview process what kinds of requests you're going to get. And if you really don't want to be someone who does a lot of trade show sponsoring, or you really don't want to be working with creative agencies and media agencies to buy those billboards or wherever it might be, like maybe it's not a fit for you. And I know we don't all have the luxury of like choosing the company we work at right now, but it is something to try to understand up front.
Well, and it makes a big difference in how, not only if you're going to enjoy that role, but how successful you're going to be. I was in an interview with a founder who was grilling me on SEO. They clearly, either they were an expert on SEO or they believed themselves to be one. Either way, it's not really relevant. I am not an expert on SEO. Never have claimed to be. Never will be. You did claim
that in an interview, actually, with me.
I claimed it in an interview. All that Taco experience has really got me tip-top at SEO. You know, every time someone searches taco, top of the list.
Yeah, you got it.
But in the interview, I was like, hey, if you believe strongly that like your path to success for marketing is SEO, that's great. I am not the person for you to hire. Not only would I not enjoy that, I would have failed spectacularly while banging my head against the wall, which isn't a good outcome for anyone involved.
I think sometimes founder requests also come in the form of like, let's run X company's playbook. It worked for them, so why aren't we doing it? So I think going back to what you were saying, Kramer, a lot of it is like internal education too, right? Like, so first understand what your founder thinks marketing is, but then part of your job is to, kind of explain that, okay, there's other ways to approach this problem and it's not just running whatever startup's playbook worked for them.
Yeah, help them expand their mind a little bit. But I think the thing is like their core thing, it's going to be very hard to change that obsession with SEO or that obsession with X, Y, or Z. But yes, you definitely want to expand their thinking on it. And I think it is helpful to say, oh, like, where did this idea come from? Or like, why are you excited about this idea? Try to get a sense of like what they care about in marketing and what they are going to be requesting. I think there's a lot to understand in terms of the motivations of other teams. And I think the more you can get into kind of the psychology of it all, the probably better equipped you are when you do get those requests. I think like let's move on though to the best defense against requests, which is setting great goals and setting goals with other people from the company. You want people to feel involved in that process. And I think that's key. But let's focus on how you all share goals, how you think about that, how you think about involving people in the process without like getting, again, totally deep into the topic of like, how do you set goals? Because that's like 3 episodes on its own.
At early stage companies, you don't always have the luxury of a really long time horizon. So when we think about like big planning, right? When we think about things like annual planning, the realities of a Series A company can be that you're like, 6 months from now, I don't really know what that looks like. Or there are key decisions we have to make in the first half of the year that are, like, depending on how those shake out, the second half of the year will be totally different. And so I think there's an important piece of, first of all, not forcing yourself into a plan that's longer term than is realistic. You need to set those like long-term sort of like checkpoints, mile markers you're getting to. You need to know the direction you're going in. But if you can't see where the business as a whole should be in a year from now, if you don't have alignment on that at the top of your company, you're not going to be able to set marketing on that path in a realistic way. And I think hoping for that leads to a lot of frustration and ultimately misalignment, because maybe people at the leadership level have different visions for that 1 year from now that haven't been expressed. And so when you're all heading for these different destinations, it's going to end up a mess. So we really approach on, I would say, a half-yearly planning base, roughly speaking. And the way we've ended up aligning other teams against it is an exercise around funnel mapping, and saying what stages of the funnel do we need to move in the next 3 to 6 months? Do we need to build category awareness because nobody has any idea that software exists for this problem? Do we need to build problem awareness because people don't know there is even a problem? Do we need to actually build advocacy because we don't have any promoters, right? And I think aligning there where you are, and then you can start to say, okay, so 6 months from now, we want there to be more category awareness. How do we do that? And then going back to the request when you get them in, and so there's an advocacy request, you say, no. We had the conversation. We actually think our advocacy is fine, and we're really focused on category awareness. And until we see XYZ movement in category awareness, we're not going to take our eye off of that ball, and looking for more like, rather than, 6 months from now, we're going to move from category awareness to product awareness, saying we're going to move to product awareness when category awareness delivers XYZ, or we've hit this milestone for category awareness, versus making it time-based.
Yeah. So if you don't involve people in those conversations, when you go back with that, it's going to sound like BS. So you have to involve other teams in those conversations. And there's definitely some exercises you can run that will help align them. And I think different startups work in different ways. If you have a startup that actually like sort of thinks in terms of the funnel or thinks in terms of different stages, like that's a good exercise to run. Some companies have less discipline around that. And so maybe it's helpful to think in terms of like, what are the big storylines we're trying to drive? So there's different things that are going to work for different companies to drive alignment across teams. I think what's also interesting that you said, and just for context, Grace is at a Series A startup, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So I do recommend the long-term time horizon for later stage startups, but I think what you said is actually really interesting, and I hadn't thought about it this way. Whereas if you plan on too far of a horizon, you're actually maybe just creating misalignment where misalignment doesn't need to exist, because you don't actually know what you're going to need to do in 3 quarters from now. So why are you spending time debating it and being misaligned there? So I think that's actually a really good point. Like, it can create misalignment that is completely unnecessary.
Yeah, right. Why debate something that may or may happen 9 months from now when the things that happen between today and 9 months from now could completely alter the outcome?
Yep.
Right. If your company can't see 9 months ahead, don't agonize trying to do it yourself.
Yep.
And pull everyone along.
Jenny, I'm like particularly curious, like how you share out goals and content goals. Jenny's on the content side is like really difficult to share and think about. So how do you share those, and what else comes up for you here on just Setting goals appropriately.
So I've, my sweet spot has always been like in Series B, Series C companies. So when I think about planning, there's usually like a little bit more process built out. We can plan on a little bit of a longer time horizon, but I still, bake in some flexibility, especially in the back half of the year. But when I formulate kind of the content plan for the year, it's really just kind of like a click down of the overall marketing plan. Typically, the content team is contributing to kind of all of the big marketing projects for the year. But again, a lot of that work happens at kind of those early conversations around getting alignment. And then when I put together like an annual plan, it really just answers a couple of high level questions. It's why, like, what are we like? What is our goal as a team for the year? Who are the kind of ICPs, target audiences we're trying to go after? What are we doing? Broad strokes, doesn't have to get into like super tactical week by week activities. What channels are we showing up in, roughly what the cadence is, and then like what's the actual like operational and headcount plan to get there. And so I try to have like the first half of the year pretty baked out, especially when you're at a larger company. It's helpful to have those things roughly set in stone. Back half of the year, you can have some loose placeholders, and then you share that out, and then people have a sense of what you're going to be executing against.
How do you share it?
Oh, I love making a deck. That is literally my therapy. I will make, and it's not a super long slide, a deck. It's like maybe like 15 slides tops.
15 is a lot.
Oh, but like I make really awesome visuals. There's like funnel maps. There's like
animations.
Yes.
There's a soundtrack.
But it's a great artifact. So if I like in one of my
She's
roles,
making artifacts.
Yeah, making artifacts. So I have like my content plan for the year, and if someone is like, "Hey, I need to, I have a request for this thing for our, partnerships team," like, "Hey, let's chat. I haven't worked with you before, but like, want to hear more about your request." I pull out my little content plan. I'm like, "Here's what we're focused on this year. Like, where do you think your request fits in? Do you think we're, touching this piece?" I think the one thing that's a little bit different for later stage startups that I see a lot is typically we're starting to, go after additional TAM. So we're moving from like one product to multi-product, one segment to another. So instead of trying to get alignment or focus on like a specific funnel stage, one thing that I try to push for is this exercise that I call the dollar exercise. We can call it $100 because of inflation, but literally I ask leaders across the company, I'm like, if you had $100, how much would you spend on ICP 1 versus 2 versus 3? And then, you compare the answers. If there's like big discrepancies, then it's worth having a discussion. And then that way I can go take that back and be like, okay, our content mix needs to look like this because this is where, the whole team is focused.
I like to do it with 2750 just to see who's good at math and who isn't, because I'm just an asshole like that. So
let's do the $13 exercise. Yeah, I think the first time I did it was $1, and people were like literally like placing like 30-cent bets, and I was like, yeah, this feels sad.
I would go for $1 million. Let's go big, or 2.7 million, whatever. So pick a dollar amount depending on how much of a jerk you want to be. Break out your calculators. But I think that's a good point. I like the dollar thing or the $100 thing or whatever dollar amount. I do like make people rank a lot, especially when working with startups. I'm like, okay, if these 4 audiences, like you have 1 through 4, because what happens when you're like, give it a high, medium, low priority, like everybody gives everything high or everything low. And so it never balances out. So the like forced ranking or the forced dividing it up, with $100, whatever it is, I think is really valuable. So, pick your poison there and force people into making priorities. So the like Kramer framework here is I recommend having I don't recommend it being 15 slides. So I'm going to disagree with Jenny on that. I'm a bullet point person. I'm also like a one, image, make it in Fig Jam, share it out person. But I talk about this thing called the marketing decision dashboard, which is kind of like goals. It includes goals, but it's really the whole marketing, not just for content or a single team. But what are your ICPs in priority order, or what dollar amounts are you putting on each segment, whatever you want to do? What are the marketing advantages or the like legs up or your catalysts for growth that you're really focused on? What are your top storylines that you're trying to, what are the stories you're trying to tell right now? What are those high level things that you want everyone to know? And then also I like to do the revenue levers, which is similar to what Grace was saying about funnel stages, but I think of it as what's most important right now: top of funnel growth with your existing audience, top of funnel growth with a new audience, conversion and efficiency throughout the funnel, or increasing the dollar amount per customer, which is really around ACV or increasing contract value, expansion, upsell, those things. So I like to put all of this plus your high level goals in one place for people to see. So whether that's 15 slide movie, that filmmaking that Jenny's doing for this, or whether it's one doc or whatever it is, get that all in one place. Just having goals kind of sometimes isn't enough to give that why that Jenny is also obsessed with. So Grace, you look like you disagree with me.
No, I was actually going to agree.
Oh,
but plot twist. I like to keep you on your toes. No, I think that the dashboard brings up a good point, which is that different people at the company are going to be able to click with different ways of framing your priorities, what you're focused on, right? There's the person who's going to split up 2750 effortlessly, and they're going to be the person to talk to about, here's the pipeline numbers we're driving, here's how everything is progressing through the funnel, here's our conversion rates, and here's what we're targeting, right? That's one person to have the conversation with. But a totally different person is going to glaze over at that, and if someone's not paying attention, like, all of your effort is not worth it if they don't have a way in that clicks in their brain. And so when you can instead have, here are the storylines or our perceptions, or even like, here's the product launches and how we're supporting them and how they're driving these other important business metrics, here's how we're making a shift for this audience. I think having all your sort of foundational marketing frameworks at your disposal and having the company familiar with them, right? But so that when you can see a person isn't getting it with like the OKRs, you can say, okay, let's take a step back. Remember this other framework we've talked about. Remember this other framework. At work every day, framework. And people are going to get it, or they're going to get confused and wonder if you know the word framework or not.
Okay, here's the thing. I never wanted framework to be a public thing. I made a joke about it at a conference, and then people really liked it. So now I just call them frameworks. And I know that it's cheesy and a little egotistical, but sometimes you got to do it. So you can call them frameworks. I'm going to call them frameworks.
Maybe I'm going to call them Grameworks.
Grameworks
for Grace.
It doesn't have the same ring to it. Cream rhymes with frame, if you didn't know. But anyway, I like that point. Everyone learns in different ways, and this comes back to understanding, especially like the psychology of your founder, the psychology of your sales leader. I mean, you don't have to like sit them down on a couch and deeply understand everything about them, but what they care about, what's going to click for them. I think it's really valuable to know. So share these things out, whether it's at an all hands meeting, whether it's in Slack, do the thing that works for your company. And sometimes you might share things and be like, people aren't listening, and like, that's up to them if they're listening or responding. But like, if you share it, it's always, you can point back to it. So I think that's really what's important. Like, ideally everyone engages and takes it all in, but that is kind of an idealistic view of how, companies operate. So just sharing it and sharing it often and having consistent ways of sharing, I think, is important. So people know where to look.
The other thing I'll add to that is, as you're executing on your plan, just reinforce the messaging. Be like, hey, we said in Q1 we were going to do X initiative to support Y goal. Now it's here. We expect to see X impact, and then the next thing on our plan is this, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I like calling this like a dashboard, because you think of dashboards as something you look at regularly. You don't just look at one once. And so having your goals, as well as some of these other foundational things, as Grace said, I think is really key. Thanks to our sponsor, Ahrefs. That's ahrefs.com with a silent A. You might think of Ahrefs as an SEO tool, but they're really a full-fledged marketing intelligence platform. Use it to study your competitors' websites, monitor backlinks, improve your content with AI, and of course, learn what your customers are searching for. They also have free courses, a YouTube channel with 600,000 plus subscribers, and free tools, all at ahrefs.com. we've been talking about all of these things, and the question was about requests, and people might think we've lost the plot. We might have lost the plot a couple of times, but like really all of this helps you be able to manage those requests. But before we do that, for a little fun and interjection, I did a post on LinkedIn recently, not coincidentally, it was definitely related to this podcast, but about what's the most absurd request you've ever received. And so I want to, before we answer how to manage the request process, I want to give people a sense of like what kind of requests we're talking about. So Grace and Jenny went and looked at the LinkedIn post, and they picked a couple of their favorite ridiculous requests. So you want to hit us with those, Jenny or Grace, or both?
Yeah, I'll go first. So these two cracked me up. First one was, we don't need any marketing besides leaving some flyers at a farmer's market. This was from a founder of a SaaS product that had nothing to do with farmers markets. I mean, very creative, thinking outside the box, really trying to, scale additional channels. But that one was amazing. The other one I loved was back in the day, more than one B2B software exec asked this person to get them on Oprah, because that's the kind of SaaS Oprah covered.
Mm-hmm. Oprah loves SaaS.
She does.
I appreciate the mentality of pushing beyond the limits of what B2B marketing is and can be. Farmers markets and Oprah.
If those aren't on your channel strategy for, next quarter, you're doing it wrong. For sure. All right. Grace, what were your faves?
Okay, when I selected, I didn't realize I was going to be reading them out loud. So my first one is a really long one to read out loud, but I'll do it anyway with gusto.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Go for it.
I was asked by a high-ranking leader to come up with a smear campaign to take out one of their not insignificant, but definitely smaller competitors. Wanted a video to go out that made fun of them, calling them names, questioning their niche, even though their business practices were entirely legitimate. Punching down in the biggest way, and wanted to distribute it across paid ads, media and PR, social, and billboards if we could get the inventory. Would not take no for an answer, had to get legal involved.
Had to get legal involved is my favorite. That's just like, had to get legal involved is the best. I've had to get legal involved a few times too in my day, to be honest. I think that's one that like my immediate answer, like if that had been the question at the top of this episode, the answer would have just been like, just say no and maybe start looking for a new job.
I'm like,
I got goosebumps not in a good way when that was read. Like, it's also cold in here, but I was like, I was having flashbacks to ridiculous things I've been asked. Like that one, I'm glad you read the whole thing. That's going to send some people and be like, really, the request that you got today probably is not that wild. So just remember that when you're feeling a little upset about it or not knowing what to say. It's not a smear campaign across multiple channels.
It's not a smear campaign. Okay, and then I have my second one, which is to run a brand campaign through only performance marketing channels and measure revenue impact within 2 weeks of launch to prove if brand works. Weep.
And then I had to get legal involved. That's how I'm going to end from now on. Great idea. Thanks for the support. Then I had to get legal involved. It worked great. Okay. Yeah. That's not how you test if brand is going to work. So we'll just leave it at that.
My poor sweet little brand heart aches.
I know, your Taco Bell brand heart.
They should have tried farmers markets for that brand campaign.
That would have paid off in 2 weeks.
Taco Bell ever try farmers markets?
Honestly,
not a bad idea.
Don't knock it.
I don't think it is a bad idea. All right. So we won't talk this much about Taco Bell in future episodes, or maybe we will. Okay. So now, like, our final thing we got to talk about is we actually have to answer this question from Sandy. And how do you manage the request process yourself? So I think we've talked about a lot of this as you go along. Like I mentioned, asking for problems, not solutions. We've talked about Asana form.
Jenny mentioned asking for problems, not solutions.
Did she? I think I did.
The request behind the request was Jenny.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry.
And at the beginning you said you were going to mix up who asked what, but then you took credit, which is the ultimate mix-up.
That is the ultimate mix-up. I'm sorry, Jenny, if I took credit for any of your ideas.
All good. We have it on tape.
Okay. I also say that a lot. So the problem is that Jenny and I talk about marketing a lot. So some of our ideas have melded and we don't know who to attribute them, which is another common
Roll the
marketing
tape.
problem. Attribution is a huge problem in marketing. So that's all I'm going to say. I apologize. I do fall into the trap. All right. What are we talking about? We're talking about managing the request process itself. Yeah. How do you do this? What's your process? And remembering that the rules of the role of founder mean that they're probably not going to follow the request process. But what do you use for not the average, but for the exceptional employees at your company to manage requests?
So I set expectations around what types of requests we'll take. So, if you have your marketing plan for the year, you've broken it down into quarterly projects. I basically, share that out broadly to be like, hey, this quarter team is focused on these projects. We tier them out. So like most of our time is going in this. Usually that captures, if you've done the planning, you're aligned with other teams, usually that captures like the bulk of the work that my team does it's like working on projects with the rest of marketing. So really we treat the request process for truly ad hoc things that fall outside of the plan. Otherwise, if you use requests as an open process, you're just going to spend all your time triaging tickets. So, we really try to kind of clarify upfront the beginning of the quarter. What are those big projects? What are all the content and creative asks? Let's account for those. And then request process is just for things that we didn't plan for. So that actually minimizes our volume week to week.
Yeah. It's only the things that fall outside. I actually wasn't sure at first if you meant only the things that fall inside or only things that fall outside. So you're using
outside.
This data. So what if someone's like, I really want to make sure that when you're doing this product launch that you're going to talk about it at farmers markets? Like, where would they say that?
That would be baked into the launch planning process.
Okay.
So at the beginning of the quarter, we know this launch is going to happen. It's probably a tier 1, which usually means large scope. So
going for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at a smaller company, how that might apply, and I know Grace can kind of talk to smaller companies, but you might not do the product launch planning process at the beginning of the quarter, but you might do it when it comes up, during the quarter or during the year. And so if someone has something they want to say about that, just say, oh, we're going to do that kickoff meeting at this time. And so there'll be a chance to share your wild and crazy ideas and talk about getting on Oprah.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, we use forms similarly for ad hoc requests, and try to do our requests on more so a project basis. We try to do quarterly, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And on a project basis is oftentimes more realistic for us. We actually, when we rolled out our request process, because we felt like we were having things just flying at us randomly, as you do, we noticed people stopped requesting things at all, period. Well, so we weren't getting any feedback. So we'd put out, say, a piece of content that was specifically with the goal of, addressing a particular objection, right? So it was a piece of content for the sales team to use to address this objection that they had told us they were hearing. And then we wouldn't get any feedback on that piece of content. And then we'd find out months later that nobody was using it and we hadn't heard why or what different, et cetera. And digging into this, we got feedback that our request process was intimidating, and that marketing was so buttoned up that people felt like they couldn't come to us, because we basically our expectations for requests were too high, quite frankly. And I don't think that means you should lower your expectations for people clearly communicating what they need and what the problem is, et cetera, and what they're trying to achieve. But instead helped us to take a step back and say, okay, marketers have a superpower, great marketers have a superpower around project management.
Well,
goals.
also great marketers who have spent years working at a project management software company. I think that we're all in this bubble where we understand deeply how to use these tools, and like I work with tons of marketers, and like I'll show them basic things in Asana or other tools, and they'll be like, "What?" I'm like, "They've had that feature for 10 years." So I think like there's a little bit of a bubble.
Yeah, but even like without a tool, right? Like guiding a project from conception, until it's out in the world, I think is a unique skill of marketers, other functions too. But like, for instance, salespeople inherently don't manage projects in the way that marketers do.
Yeah, they
And it's
manage
just
accounts, but that's kind of almost, sometimes like a solo thing.
this
different process.
skill set is different, right? So what we've done is we still have the marketing request form. We still take marketing requests, but we've started to like our primary stakeholder teams, like sales, like customer success, like product to a certain extent, but that's more on like a product launch basis. We go proactively and say, just talk to us about the problems you're having. To have a conversation with us, so it's not I'm forcing you to write this out in a request format that you're unfamiliar with, that feels intimidating to you. Instead, like have a conversation with our team and start from there. And I think that also helps build the feeling that like we are on the same team, we are working towards the same goals, we want to support you, and we're here and open for feedback when things are or aren't working for you. But it's taken us really proactively soliciting that. And now that is the way most of our requests come in.
Yeah, I think you need both. I think you need a way, whether it's during a planning process, whether it's planning process plus other times during the quarter of the year, whatever your cycle is, where you invite those, not requests, but you invite people to talk about problems or opportunities that they see, things that are blocking them, and then also have that request process. Because, I mean, things do come up. But I would recommend your request process not be in Slack, because what then happens is you end up having synchronous conversations about the request, and you do not want that. You want your request process to go somewhere where you can prioritize them. So that's why project management tool of your choice is a great way to do that, or even a spreadsheet where you can have the prioritization criteria that I talked about, similar things that are on that decision dashboard, your priority ICPs, your big projects, whatever it is, and you can prioritize against them. So, and then when you go back to someone, it's like, oh, hey, like here's a link to where we prioritize this and sort of why we said no. I mean, you don't need to do that big of a process for everything that comes through, but I think it is helpful to have your request process happen in a place where you can add that and where it doesn't get into people debating. Because the worst thing that can happen is like someone requests something in Slack and you were in meetings all day, and you come back and there's been like this whole discussion going on about this request with everyone weighing in. And now you've got a whole bunch of people that are thinking about it and talking about it. And it's just so much more hassle, and it's not productive for anyone. So
the 98 reply thread.
Yeah. Going back to what Grace said about the form being like too intimidating, I think, like you need to kind of strike the balance of getting the information you need to actually like assess the request and figure out if it makes sense to action on, versus making it like so onerous that people are like too scared to even fill it out. But I think that requires a bit of additional internal education, or with people who maybe just don't understand what goes into getting a piece of creative out or launching a campaign. They think it's just like, oh, we need this thing and it just happens. I have definitely gotten requests for, we need a TV commercial in 2 weeks, which is just not going to happen.
I mean, I could make them in a day.
Let's see you do it.
No, I definitely can't. I think there's like a good point here, though, back to internal marketing. I was recently looking at someone's like presentation. I was watching for a company I work with. I was watching a video of a marketing team presenting to the whole company at an all hands meeting, which was just a really fun thing to do on my nights and weekends. But I was watching this, and it was actually somewhat enlightening, because I've done this too, where you're walking through like all of the details of a plan, and it's people aren't going to remember all of that. And so like sometimes I feel like marketers use these opportunities to give them every detail of a plan or everything. And sometimes it's best to share those async. And in those all hands meetings, walk through how you make content, walk through how the process of a TV commercial, like give them some of the inside look and how marketing works is often a much better use of everyone's time when everyone's together than giving them all the details of a plan that they're not going to remember. So some of the like day in the life of a marketer stuff is really valuable to getting people on the same page as you.
My favorite is customer case studies. Sales, GTM always wants more case studies.
Oh, I forgot about that one. That's
Which
More case studies.
I love writing customer stories. Those are actually really fun. Here's the thing.
You like
can
writing
typically-
customer stories?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
we
do.
gotta have someone needs to send in a question to us about should I write that case study? Because I feel like we're gonna have really different opinions here, Jenny. Because
Well, okay, so the case study process. Usually it's pretty streamlined. If you can get the interview process scheduled, you get your notes, there's a typical format, you write it. Where the process gets bogged down is the approval piece, right? So you send it back to the customer, they could get back to you in a week or 6 months
Or never.
or a year
which
or
is
never.
brutal.
Or never.
And I
they
think
can change their
that's-
mind.
They can ghost
Yeah.
you.
And I think that's the part that other teams don't necessarily recognize when they're like, why don't we have more case studies, or why isn't it taking so long? So like educating the team on like what actually goes into getting that thing out the door, I think it can be very
so you're saying
illuminating.
walk the company through the customer case study process. Yeah, the behind the scenes thing. And I don't think I've ever really like talked about that anywhere or really had thought about it until I spent, an evening last week watching that all hands video. And I was like, this would be so much better if it was just how we did this campaign or the behind the scenes or giving people a sense of what goes into marketing, because everyone does think they're a marketer and I don't think they understand some of the complexities.
Yeah, well, and I think it's a good reminder of a lesson we use in like our external marketing all the time, which is that people have really short memories. They don't tend to remember a lot of
Me
facts.
especially. I just think that things that Jenny said, I said, or
Right? Like people, the reality is people don't remember things unless A, it is exceptionally relevant to their specific need in that very moment, or B, it made them feel something. Like those are the two ways that you're going to get someone to remember something. And to make sure it's hyper relevant to the individual person is kind of a losing battle especially if you're talking to the whole company. Right? And so if you can make them feel, wow, this case study process seems really hard for the marketing team, and I appreciate the work they're doing here.
Yeah,
they don't need to remember
when you get
the email
finally get that
exchange.
big name customer out on your website. That's like even more of a big win because it took
Right.
a year to get approval.
They don't need to know, oh, there was all this back and forth, and here's how it works to produce a video. And right, that what they need to walk away with is this was a lot of work that like I have a lot of respect for the marketing team doing. And so focusing on how you communicate like the feeling you want people to have, which obviously we talk about in marketing all the time, but applying that internally, because they're not going to remember your dashboard. They're probably not even going to remember where your dashboard is, if we're being totally honest.
But you can remind them where it is, right?
You can remind them, but
yeah, that's kind of why I miss some of the in-person stuff. Or I mean, I'm not on a team anymore, but I would imagine I would miss the in-person stuff because you could like.
Hey,
literally
we're
put
on a
this
skee ball
dashboard-
team.
Oh yeah, we were on a skee ball team. That was my in-person marketing. Yeah, Jenny and I were on a marketers only skee ball team. So there's that. But anyway, what I was saying is like it's great if you have like a physical TV where you can put some of those things on, but it's also funny when there's like a dashboard on a TV in an office that everyone's in every day and people still don't know where to look for something. That's good too. So yeah, people have short attention spans, but get creative with what you present and show, but also make sure there is an easy place to point to where all of your goals and strategic decisions are. So, all right, we're going to wrap this up. What is our final answer for Sandy? Like a 1 to 2 sentence. Sandy asked us, she's a small team. They're doing great. We think that POCUS is bigger than they are, which is the best compliment as a marketer when people think you're bigger than you are, because that means you're hitting the right. We're in the ICP for POCUS. It's a tool for go-to-market. So they're doing a great job at having big moments and big things that stand out with a small team. But how should she think about really handling requests that come in? What's your 1 to 2 sentence takeaway for Sandy and everyone else who might be thinking the same thing?
Mine is make a plan, share the plan, and then prioritize any incoming requests against that plan. You're going to be okay.
Cool. We're going to be okay. It's going to be my takeaway for every episode. You're going to be okay. Just go to legal.
Yes.
Go to legal.
We're gonna get legal
When in doubt,
involved.
go to legal.
What's your answer?
Okay, my answer is goals, 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 goals. Write the goals, share the goals, and teach the people at your company how to also write goals to tell you the why.
Yep.
Right? So that you're all speaking the same language and you never get a goal like write a blog post.
Yep. Oh, that's not a goal. It's not a goal. That's something else I want people to write in. Is this a goal?
Rapid fire. Is this a goal?
Is this a goal? We'll do that episode. We definitely will.
We didn't talk about non-goals.
I was just going to say that. That's exactly what I was going to say. I said, this isn't my main takeaway, but I'm realizing we talked about goals. We talked about the why. We didn't talk about non-goals. Non-goals are my favorite. I love setting non-goals. Way more fun to set than goals, which is just, here's what we're not doing this quarter and why. Here's what we're not doing this month and why. And it really lets people know, hey, I heard you. And I think this is key for request process as well, is I heard your request. I took it in. I thought about it, and it's still a no. But I think setting non-goals when you set goals and having that list front and center is critical. And so my big takeaway is make sure people know what you're doing, what you're not doing, and why. So when they ask for things, they understand how you're making the decisions and don't just think you're a jerk. Don't be a jerk. That's my other takeaway. All right, cool. Anything else that did I say everything you wanted me to say about non-goals, Jenny?
Yeah, covered it.
Thanks to our sponsor, Adio, the next generation CRM. Sync your email and calendar to get set up in minutes. Your contact data will then be instantly enriched so you can get rid of all those inbound form fields. Their AI-driven platform then helps you build complex agents and workflows like prospecting, lead routing, and more, all without needing to hire a RevOps contractor. Whether you have a PLG or a sales-led go-to-market motion, are switching from HubSpot or Salesforce, or just getting started with a CRM, check out Adio at attio.com/dearmarketers for 15% off your first year. Now it's time for Best Marketer, where I quiz my co-hosts. I gave you questions in advance that I thought I was going to ask for this game, but I'm not going to ask those questions because it's more fun to keep you on your toes. I'm going to make this a little more fun. It's our first episode. I think, I've given you all a little bit of crap during this. You've given me some, but what's the most ridiculous thing I ever asked you to do when I was your manager?
You were not my direct manager,
Okay.
so that made it scarier. You were my manager's manager.
Scarier. Look how far we've come, Jenny. Look how far we've come. You're not scared of me anymore.
Most ridiculous thing that is top of mind is when we did the scrapathon at Asana. I think our monthly metrics were down, and so we did a 1-day scrapathon where we all
What
just,
is the scrapathon? I made that up, so I don't think people know.
It was a hackathon meets scrappy marketing ideas, and we were all supposed to each come up with something that we could execute in a 2-day time frame that could help us hit a metric. I don't remember what I delivered, but our friend Devin did write a blog post about Steph Curry that is still live.
It's still live? Okay, we should link to it in the show notes.
It was what Steph Curry can teach us about teamwork or something.
So the idea here wasn't to make everyone do a random act of marketing in
There
one
was
day.
a clear goal.
There was a clear goal.
Okay.
Yes.
So it
There
was
was
like,
a
let's
clear
get
goal.
everyone together to just get some quick wins against a goal, have a little fun. It was in the spirit of a hackathon. Would I do a scrapathon again? I'm not sure. But yeah, Devin.
As I said then, you can't spell scrappy without crappy, and I think that was the takeaway.
Can't spell scrappy with that. I have some Dear Marketers Market 1 stuff on the wall behind me. I should print that out now. You can't spell crappy without scrappy with. I can't even say it. It's cool. Grace, what's the most ridiculous thing I ever asked you to do?
So many, but I think
Grace worked with me twice at Asana and Carta, so she's got a long list to choose from.
the one that is most easily explained is calculating the value of a visit to our thought leadership blog so that we could determine what the ad spend should be. So we could determine like what the cost per web visit should be for ads going to the thought leadership blog.
That's not ridiculous. Yeah, it's a little
Do you remember what the value
Yeah,
of a
it
web
was
visit
because
was?
of the value.
Oh, because it was a web visit. It wasn't like 1,000 web visits. Okay, so it was probably
No.
like 0.00001 cent.
Well, you know what? Actually, better. It was 4 cents.
Oh,
Oh,
it was
you're
4.
mad.
I thought it was 2. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it was 4 cents was the value of one web visit. And so then we stopped running ads to the thought leadership blog.
Probably made sense, actually, to
Tough
stop.
stuff.
I don't think either one of those are that ridiculous. And I think I definitely ask for more ridiculous things. But the point of me asking this question, so I'm gonna give
There was the flower situation for an event.
tell the flower situation. You can one up yourself and Jenny with a better answer because this is supposed to be like fun, ending, quick. I'm supposed to pick a winner here on who has the best answer. So what's the flower situation?
Okay, there was an event, a live event, for which we needed flowers on the tables.
Yellow flowers.
Yellow flowers. Somebody on our team spent half a day at the San Francisco flower market trying to pick out yellow flowers to no avail that weren't mums. It was an event in October. So we couldn't have mums, even though that's the only yellow flower available in September for any reasonable cost. And so the event was, I think, on a Monday or a Tuesday. On the Sunday, so someone had spent half a day at the flower market trying to find flowers, FaceTiming me. I was like, this is a crazy thing that you're doing. Then on the Sunday before the event, I went to a florist in San Francisco, a tiny florist. I happened to be walking by and I said, hello, can you please make me 13 yellow bouquets? And they did. And they were beautiful. They were mostly sunflowers. They were very nice and not mums. Horrible.
You know, I think the point here is that under stress, even the greatest of humans like myself, I'm kidding, with the best of intentions, still make ridiculous, absurd requests. Why did I care if it wasn't a mom?
And I think the ROI, I think the ROI was better. People would have seen mums and said, these are cheap ass flowers.
Flowers, no mom.
And I'm no longer influenced by this brand event.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm sorry about all of those things, and I'm happy that we've moved past my ridiculous requests and are now hosting this podcast together. And I think that means there's hope for all of you. Even when you get a ridiculous request from a person, it doesn't mean they're horrible. It just means their request is. All right.
Wait, idea for a Market 1 billboard? Just on 101, you shouldn't have a billboard here.
Oh, that's really good. You shouldn't have
Dear marketers, you shouldn't have a billboard here.
Dear marketers, these billboards cost too much money. Don't do it. Dear founders.
Dear marketers, just say no to your founder's request for a billboard.
Just say no.
All right, so given that, Grace wins this whole episode because that's a genius idea. Winning point to Grace. So thanks for listening to the first ever episode of Dear Marketers. It'll only get better over time, I think. And thanks to Sandy for writing in with her amazing question, and for Grace and Jenny for talking about requests, which I think all gives us bad memories and takes us back to places we don't want to remember. So thanks for going on this journey with us, and till next time.